Welcome to the Hidden Gifts of Loss podcast. I have Karen DeBonis
Very
on my
good.
show
Yeah.
today, and she has written this wonderful book, Growth, about her son and the brain tumor that they survived. And this is such a great topic. We think of loss as a death, and it's not. This is not death, but it's definitely a loss because he had a brain tumor, and it took
Right.
forever for you
Mhm.
guys to get the kind of help that you needed.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
I'm
Thanks,
so
Julie.
excited to have you.
Happy to
Yeah.
happy to be here.
So in the beginning, there were just like little things that
Mhm.
none of the doctors were picking up on. And
Yeah.
what I love is how you got so strong, how you transformed from in the beginning being timid and just
Yeah.
taking the doctor's word for it till,
Mhm.
and then we just see you like rise up into your
Thank you.
power. And it's just so beautiful.
Wow.
And that's one of those things that we don't think loss is going to do. So
It's true. Well, and it's that you see it that way, and I've heard from a lot of readers that's what they see, that I got really strong and powerful. And I do see that now, but it really took me, even after the book was written, it took me a long time to embrace that, because what I saw, I feel like the fairy tale version of my story is this mom is very timid, and then her son gets sick and she becomes this warrior, and never again in her life does anybody, she never lets anybody push her around anymore. And it's, oh, I so wish that was my story. But my story is, I pushed through. This timidity on my part was a lot of people pleasing, and I pushed through it. And we can talk a little bit more about some of the details, but I pushed through it to really save my son, is how I look at it, because the doctors weren't listening. My husband was not listening. And so I got him diagnosed, but then I went back into my shell again. And it was because it was this speaking up for myself and advocating on behalf of my son was so new for me and so foreign. I did what I had to do in that crisis,
mhm.
but then I was just trying to figure out how to parent this child with a brain injury, and he was very highly functioning for someone with a brain injury, but still just not knowing what was caused by the brain tumor and what was just adolescence and what was whatever. It took me a long time again to get back to that self and really make it stick, where that stronger self is with me all the time. And for me, really, a lot, in many ways, it was the process, not even the process of writing the book, but the process of revising the book and finalizing the book, where I would write something and then I would go back to it the next day, the next month, whenever it was, the next year, and look at it again and think, first I'd think, no, that doesn't capture it. So I really had to dig into what was going on in my head, what led me to behave in the way I did. And then when I had that truth on the page, I couldn't hide anymore. I had to really confront it and say, you know what? This is not who I want to be. This is not who I feel like I was put on this earth to be. And I need to change. And so it was really just exposing myself, exposing those weaknesses, that made me realize I don't want to be that person anymore. And
Mm.
it's been slow progress, but there are times something will come up and I'll think to myself, who is that person? So it's really, at my age, I just admitted that I was earlier, that I was 65, and it took me a while, but it's okay. There's still purpose in having this growth, this personal growth at this point.
Yeah, and that I love the title because it's your growth, but then also the growth of a brain tumor.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's where that title came from. You're right. It's the tangible and the intangible growth. But I guess I'll just, before I get into where the growth came from, just tell a little bit about what happened. You said there was a point where things started happening. Son was very bright. We called him our little Einstein. I called him my gazelle because he would out in the yard. He just ran like a gazelle. It was just beautiful to watch. He had all this energy, and it was nice to see him out in the yard burning off that energy. And then when he was 8, it started with this odd eye rolling tic. And it was diagnosed by the pediatrician who we really trusted as a habit tic, which is common, as I found out, in children, especially boys, ages 8 to 11. And my son Matthew was 8 at the time. So it made sense. But there was that little part in my gut that just felt troubled by it.
Mhm.
And he developed other tics and odd behaviors. And then he really started slowing down and then started getting lethargic. And he just, because losing his edge cognitively, and we even ended up pulling him out of the gifted program because he couldn't keep up. And all along, the pediatrician just kept saying, nope, everything's normal. Nope, nothing to worry about. And it was really medical gaslighting, which I wasn't aware of at the time. And even when the book came out, I wasn't that familiar with the word, that term. It doesn't appear in the book. But since it's come out, I've come to identify that that's what it is, medical gaslighting, when my concerns and as a parent of the patient were being dismissed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then finally, when I became strong enough to really start pushing for things to happen, we got an MRI
Mhm.
and found the growth. And that's how the doctors identified it to us. They said, we found a growth. So growth to me was just that word that changed our life. And in many ways, so growth just seemed like just a natural for the title.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I know that you as a parent, you know that this is what my kid was like and this
Yeah.
is what he's
Yeah.
like now. And don't
Yeah.
tell me this is
Mhm.
normal.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not. And I remember reading at one point that you saw a report or something where they had ruled out Munchausen by proxy. Oh my, I was horrified when I read that. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
talk
I
about
know.
medical gaslighting. It's just like
Yeah,
infuriating that they would
yeah.
even
It
like,
was, yeah, such a betrayal. In case people don't know, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a severe mental illness where a parent, usually the mother, either causes her child to be sick or makes up stories about her child being sick in order to satisfy her own needs for attention or whatever. And yeah, so we weren't getting anywhere with this pediatrician, and we had a psychologist at the time that we were seeing. And at first, he diagnosed ADHD, which really made a lot of sense. Everything fit, the symptoms all fit until they didn't fit. But he really pushed me to get the records of the doctor so I could just stay on top of what was going on. And it was in the records that I saw that she had called the child psychologist to ask to say that she suspected Munchausen syndrome by proxy and to ask what he thought about it. And so I remember, and I wrote the scene about reading in her words and her illegible writing,
yeah.
but seeing that and just the betrayal was just horrendous. It was
It
just
is.
horrendous.
It
Um,
really is. Oh
Yeah. And so
God.
this is interesting. So thank goodness we had that child psychologist. He really believed in me and he believed in us. And he came to believe that there was something more wrong than just ADHD.
Mhm.
So when I had tried to reach him a number of years ago about my book, and I found the practice where he was at, and we're talking like this was like 25 years ago or so when my son was diagnosed. So we're going back a ways. Um, and I had left a message, but I didn't hear back. And I thought, okay, he doesn't want to be contacted. I want to respect that. And then shortly before my book came out, I don't know if I looked for him on Facebook or he just popped up as someone I might know. And I sent him a friend request and he accepted. And I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, and I said, I'd like to thank you for what you did for us. And I wrote this book and I'd like to give you a signed copy. So he came to one of my book launches and was very supportive. And he and I now have partnered together to teach a program locally about how to talk to your child's doctor. And I know, I am so
Good.
excited about it. And I told him, I said, like when I had approached him about this and he was very excited and I think we met for lunch, but then we just talked and I said, the one question I have is, how did you know? How did you know that I wasn't making things up, that I wasn't exaggerating? And he had some really, as a psychologist, he had some really thoughtful, deep answers to that. And I just feel like that's the type of thing that so many parents could benefit from because so many parents deal with, and women, even as patients themselves, and especially like women of color and women of fewer means. And I just think it's such an important conversation. So, talk about growth. It's just interesting how this whole concept has really mushroomed and has broadened in a lot of really positive ways.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to a writer friend and she was saying how so many times we go through something and then it actually is the thing that puts us on the path that we were meant to be on.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
at the time you're just a mom and you're just struggling and you're just not getting the
right,
help you need and you're not even
right,
thinking something
right.
good is going to come out of this. You just want
Yeah,
your child to be okay.
yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
now you're helping other people take
Yeah,
care of
yeah.
be able to advocate for their children. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel that way. And so my writing journey is, I guess, also convoluted, like my son's development of all this stuff, where I started writing and I was not a writer. But when I started telling friends a little bit more after my son was diagnosed, a little bit more about some of these things that happened, I got the cliche response, oh, you got to write a book. And I was like, oh, I'm not a writer. Me? No, no way. And the more I thought about it, I wanted to tell this story of being a people pleaser because I knew that there were other women out there like me. I could observe a woman and see myself in her actions and knew that she would see herself in my book. And I just
Mhm.
felt like I wanted to tell the story. So I worked on it for a while and then I had gone back to work after Matt's surgery. He had gone back to school. And then there came a point where that wasn't working. So I left my job to just really mentor him for a while and then went back to work. And then for a bunch of different reasons in 2016, I was leaving my job again for my own health reasons. And I just I felt like the universe was saying, I'm giving you the gift of time to finish your book. And
Yes.
I really felt so in the 7 years that it took me to finish it, which I never thought it would take that long, but I wasn't a writer. I still had a lot to learn. One of the things that really helped me through, and you said you're writing a book also, and that it gets really tough sometimes. And one of the things that kept me going was I truly had the sense that this was my purpose in life. This is what I was supposed to be doing. And so really that did make it easier for me because I knew that I couldn't quit. I had to figure out a way to keep going.
Hmm. Yeah, those things like they aren't going to leave you alone, right? You have to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. That's how I got that response a lot too when I would tell people stories about my mom died right at the beginning of COVID and taking
Hmm.
care of her. And it was just like there were just so many weird little things. And just because of the fact that it was COVID and we couldn't have a funeral, and they're just like things that you
Yeah,
hadn't people hadn't dealt with before. I hadn't dealt with death
right.
at all. And then
Hmm.
you throw COVID in the
Yeah,
back as the backdrop.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
you got to tell the story. Yeah, I've been working on it, but then it led to this.
Mm.
Interviewing people for this podcast has been just amazing.
Wow.
The stories that I wouldn't have heard like yours. And so anyway, how is Matthew now?
Matthew's doing very well. He turned 38 about a little over a month ago and lives by himself and has his own house and works for the tax department and drives and rides a bike. And he's the type of kid like something happened for me recently and he texted me, do you want to talk about it? Really? This is my son. He's just very compassionate and very loving and caring. And he has a brain injury from his childhood brain tumor.
Mm.
I don't talk a lot about the struggles that he has now because this is now his story. He was
Sure.
completely on board with this book. Even when he was young, I have a scene in there about we're watching Oprah some Friday after school, and the story was a mom who had been through some type of medical crisis with her child, and Matthew looks at me, he says, "Mom, we could be on Oprah," and I'm like, yeah, we could. So that was pretty funny. So he's always been in support of it. Although at this point he says, Mom, that's your story. I have a different story, and that's okay. But I don't talk other than to say that he has what I call hiccups now. He still has some like short-term memory hiccups and
Yeah.
some organizational things, that type of
Mm.
stuff. But
But wow,
really, yeah, we
that's
can,
amazing.
yeah,
This the
everything went through and
yeah.
considering what some people go through with brain tumors and brain injuries. Yeah, we're all very fortunate.
Yeah, yeah, and especially you have this little boy and you don't really know what they're thinking. I have a
Yeah,
daughter too, and you don't know what they're thinking. And
right,
what was
right.
that like? What was it like for him? He's going to school
Yeah,
and he's trying to like keep up, and then nobody
right,
knows what's going on. And
right,
my God,
right.
did they operate on his brain ever? Was that
Yes,
not
yeah.
possible? Or
In the same breath that we were told we found a growth, they said, we believe it's benign. So it's okay, that's good. I feel happy or sad right now. I'm not
ugh,
sure. And then they said, and it's inoperable. And it's okay, I think that's not good. How do I feel right now? But what they determined was that so he had this growth on his brainstem, which is right in the middle of your head where the brain connects to the spinal column in the back. And we have ventricles in our brain, which are cavities filled with cerebrospinal fluid. That's a mouthful to say.
this,
And the ventricles both create the fluid and circulate it through the brain, and then it exits through the spinal cord to be reabsorbed by the body. And the place where Matthew's tumor was blocking the exit of fluid. What was happening was these ventricles were just like expanding like water balloons. And what I say in the book, it expanded and just squished his brain into a sliver against his skull. And I have a picture in there of the MRI where you can see it.
yeah,
And I don't even know how he was alive because it
right?
was just, and that's why his symptoms were so pervasive. They were physical, cognitive, emotional, social, just every aspect because every part of his brain was being affected. So we were fortunate that in the past what they would do, and so that was called hydrocephalus. It was literally water on the brain. It's often found more often in infants, I think, for different reasons, but that's what he had. So typically they will put a shunt in and they will direct the fluid down into the abdomen. I think the shunt usually goes all the way down to the abdomen, but shunts have a high rate of infection and sometimes failure. They need to be redone. So there was a new surgery that was being practiced. And so we live in upstate New York. The only two places in the country where the surgery was offered was New York City, which is about 3 hours drive south from us, and Boston, which is about a 3 hours drive east from us.
Mm.
So how fortunate were we that we didn't have
Yeah,
to fly across the country or whatever.
wow.
This new surgery, what they do is they actually go into the brain, which in itself is not a good thing, but
Scary,
they
yeah.
poke a hole in one of the ventricles. So the fluid on its own kind of just drips away into the spinal column, which is the safer way to do it. If the fluid drips out or drains too quickly, it can actually hold the brain tissue from the skull, I think it's
Oh,
called the dura mater there. I'm not sure if I have that
yeah.
right, but
Whoa.
so we were very fortunate that he could have that done, had the surgery, and we were basically told no restrictions. I was home for a couple weeks with him, but no restrictions. He was back to school. And because kids with this surgery and this type of tumor, it was called a pilocytic astrocytoma, they bounce back. Those are the exact words the doctors use, bounce back. So
Wow.
we just went back to our old life and we were waiting. Okay, when is this bouncing back going to happen? And it took us a couple of years to realize,
Oh,
no, he's not going to bounce
mm,
back. Because
wow.
his brain had under siege for so long
Yeah.
that I think there was more damage than anybody expected.
Mm,
So he's, quite far, but it really took a long time to get to this point. I call it a
mhm.
20-year recovery. So,
Wow. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah, if anybody had been able to diagnose it, it doesn't do any good to say this could have been or that could have been. But obviously he
Yeah.
didn't have it when he was like younger because you said he was a
Right.
gazelle. He was running
Right.
around.
Yeah. Although the doctor said the tumor could have been there since birth, but it was such a slow, may have been too small then to do any damage. And the damage accumulated maybe drop by drop. So it just took that slow progression, or maybe it just popped up when he was
Yeah,
8. So it's
never
just no
know.
way to know. Yeah.
Right. Is it a rare kind of tumor? Or
I'll talk about this in the book, and I forget my research now, but I think in general, brain tumors are rare for children. This one, I think it might be one of the more common ones, but they are typically benign and typically slow growing.
yeah.
So fortunately, if you had to have a brain tumor, this is the one to have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great getting that information out there because obviously it's not the first thing that they thought of, at least back then.
Right,
Maybe now
right.
there's more of an awareness.
Yeah,
Um,
there is, yeah, more awareness and more treatments. They're always coming up with some novel strategies that seem to be have hope to make a difference for brain tumors. So that's really helpful.
yeah.
The other thing that's maybe would give comfort to other parents is my son, one of the reasons that it was very hard to diagnose is that he didn't have two of the most common symptoms of brain tumor, which is headaches and seizures. He did not have headaches. He did not have seizures. So I think doctors just
Yeah.
thinking brain tumors. They weren't thinking some other things that affect the brain. So it was just one
Yeah.
of those kind of unusual cases where it was very easy to slip through the cracks.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad that he's okay and
Thank you. Yeah. Me too.
your family's okay
Yeah.
and
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That's
It's a
wow,
long
that's
journey.
quite something and so
Yeah.
good. Great that you wrote this book. I was completely absorbed in the book. Just
Thank you. Oh,
oh
I appreciate
yeah.
hearing that. Again, as a writer, it's just there's a lot to learn. And when I decided in 2016 I was going to pick up my book again and really do it this time, what I say is I just became a sponge. I just fortunately online learning was more of a thing then than it had been before. There were tons of online classes I could take, and I don't think I took anything live, in fact, at the time. But I had some health issues, so it was hard for me to get out. So it was really, I was fortunate to have that. And Facebook, I found some Facebook groups that were very supportive and very informative, and conferences when I could. So I just sucked up everything that I could, and ultimately found a really great writing group, critique
Mm.
group. And I credit them. In fact, we have an interesting story. So we started maybe about 5 years ago. And I think there were 7 of us originally, and one person decided it wasn't for her, so we were down to 6. And then a couple years later, 2 dropped out because they had other things going on. And we brought one on, and when we lost one, and we ended up with a core of 4 of us. And one by one, we have all gotten a book deal, and we all wrote memoirs. So I was the first, and then we had another one later that year, 2023, and then one earlier this year in April, and then one next February.
Oh
So
no.
we call ourselves Writers Tears. Yeah, and really we all credit each other with elevating our writing to the point where we could get book deals because as memoirists, we were all in that space of being vulnerable and what is that? Just knowing how difficult that is to put yourself out there like that. But also we were like everybody was being a sponge. I don't think none of us were really regular writers before we started these memoirs. We could share all the information that we learned with each other and support each other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's,
that
when you're
was,
writing memoirs, you're the protagonist basically. So it's like hard.
yeah,
You need the reflection of other writers
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
your stuff. And I need to see how, yeah, how does somebody else see this when it's not just all about me? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So good. I'm in a
Thank-
little writers group too that we just like, we just met right before this.
So
In fact,
nice.
I think that's where I saw your book was in, I did Memoir Writing Inc., which is with Allison Waring, and there's an alumni group on Facebook. And
Uh-huh.
so somebody posted these are the next books that next memoirs that I want to read. And then I saw yours on
Oh,
that
no
page.
kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
It's
so
like, oh, well, I'm gonna
cool.
read that one.
Oh, that's so
And I
cool.
know it's super cool.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's been so fun because I've been reaching out to a lot of writers too. And people are like, yeah, I'll tell my story on your
Yeah.
podcast. It is a really fun way to meet people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And 7 years is, sounds like a long time, but then it doesn't either. I've heard people say it took them 10 years, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not like you
Yeah.
can sit there for 40 hours a week and just work on your memoir. If
Right.
you are somebody, then I'm in awe because
Yeah.
it goes in cycles and then
Right.
things happen in
Mhm.
life. And yeah,
Right.
congratulations on
Thank
finishing
you.
it. It's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you too for being in the, what do they call, in the rumble of it and just doing all the stuff that you have to do.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
Uh,
Do you have anything else that you would want to share with parents or any hope for us
um,
writers? There, you've already said so
yeah.
many things, but yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah. I think of this in terms of parents. Obviously, I think everybody knows this. You're your best advocate for your child. And I think everybody knows that it's important to speak up. It's a reminder, but it's also, I want to distinguish between women for whom speaking up is something that they have some experience with, where maybe they just need permission to, yes, you have permission to push back against your doctor. Use the phrase, if they say this is normal, use the phrase, this is not normal for my child. I have a doctor friend who told me that is the key to point out to a doctor that they're missing the mark. But the other thing I would say is for women for whom the very thought of kind of speaking up or speaking back strongly to a doctor makes them quake in their shoes, like it did for me. I'm sorry to say, but that is my truth. I guess what I would want to say is recognize that in yourself, share that truth with someone you trust, a partner, friends, family, and put yourself out there. So take a risk when you start paying attention, when you recognize that you have not stood up for yourself, or when you let somebody, you don't really want to do something, but you do it anyhow because you feel bad for the person or whatever it is. We all do some of that. It's just part
right.
of living in society. But if you find that it's a pattern with you, don't feel like you have to be perfect right away, but own up to your mistakes with your trusted person. It could be a live person or a friend on Facebook or something like that. Find a place where you can own up. Tell them what happened. Oh my God. And I'll tell an honest story. And this just shows the struggle. So I've come really far. I can speak up for myself better. I'll try to think of a specific example, but recently I was at my hairdresser's who I love her. I love her shop. I don't always like how she cuts my hair. And she finished my hair and spun me around. And I looked at it and I thought, you're going to send me home looking like this? And yet, what did I say? Oh, it looks nice. So there you go. I just admitted this is
Mhm.
when these things happen to me, I feel like it just goes to show how deep and how deeply ingrained this tendency to want to please others goes, that it takes a grown woman who is accomplished. I've had a career, I wrote a book, I have a master's degree, and yet I struggle that much. So what I would say to you is don't get caught up immediately in not having successes. Own up in some way publicly to the times you fail, because that will get you paying more attention to all the little clues that come in
Mhm.
to that go into that failure, and then start strategizing. And if you can, with your trusted person, start strategizing, what could you say next time? And it doesn't have to be a loud, obnoxious, angry type of confrontation. Some of the things that I've learned to say are things like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, or let me think about that. I'll get back to you. But you can buy yourself a little bit of time. Yeah, and those are helpful. So I guess for women who hopefully have not yet had a medical crisis for a loved one or for yourself, where you're stuck in this position where you really have to speak up for yourself,
Mhm.
build those muscles now. So they will work for you. They will fire for you when you need them. It's really important to do that because you don't want to get in a position where, like me, you don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. Yeah, we are as women. That is what we're taught. Just be good, be quiet,
Yeah,
don't make it
yeah,
mad, don't make waves.
right. Yeah. And some women somehow overcome that. Like I have a sister, she's about 4 years younger than me. She's one of the most assertive people I've ever known. And she's lovely. She's sweet also. And it's like, how does she do that? But she's a role model. So that's another suggestion is find a role model. I have a friend also who is just super nice, and yet she had some construction going on in her kitchen and she wasn't happy with something that they were doing. And she just said to them, wait a minute, that's not right. And I thought, oh, wow, that's all it is. I could do that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so find your role models.
Yeah, yeah, and the support of the community, even just like you said, just one other person that you trust. Kind of
Yeah. And
practice
exactly.
building those muscles because
Yeah.
we all need that. Most
Yeah.
of us women,
Yeah.
need that,
Yeah.
and it's a
Exactly.
lifelong thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And let's see, in terms of writers, I guess I would say be a sponge. Just learn everything you can learn. There's so many classes and things you can do for free. And even if they're not free, some of them, I don't know if Julie, if oh, I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. Jane Friedman.
Mhm.
Um, oh my goodness, she has the best classes for $25. They're all remote. And
Oh, I'm writing it down.
yeah, janefriedman.com
Okay.
has a couple different like newsletters and that type of thing. But if you just look her up, and all her classes are top notch and just so much information for 25 bucks.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. I will
So
check
yeah,
it
there's
out.
so much to learn. And believe that you can do it,
Mhm.
because I really came from nothing in terms of being a writer. I wasn't a writer at all. And I learned it's a skill. Some people have the gift and they don't have to work as hard as it, but other people can build the skill. So it is possible.
Yeah, just a perfect example. It's just absolutely wonderful. What I loved your book, wonderfully
Thank
written.
you.
I was
Thank you
completely
so
pulled in from the very
Oh, thank
beginning.
you
I was just
so
like, oh
much.
my God, what happened? What's
Yeah.
gonna happen next?
You know,
Wow.
that's music to a writer's
Oh,
ears.
I know, yeah, for
And I
sure.
know
Oh,
that's really cliche. I would never write that, but I really try not to use cliches, but
right.
you can
That's
say them. That's okay.
oh, but it's true though.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and
Thank
chat with
you.
me today.
Thanks for the
Yeah. You
opportunity.
still live in upstate New York?
I do.
We're
Yep.
not that far. I'm in Ohio.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah, I saw
yeah.
that. We're in Albany, so we're like the eastern
Okay.
end here near
Yeah.
Albany.
Oh,
So where in Ohio are you?
I'm in Monroe Falls, so I'm about 45 minutes south of Cleveland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too far.
Yeah. Beautiful though up there in upstate New York. We have the same looking time of year.
Yeah,
Leaves are
yeah,
starting to
similar.
change and
I
everything. So
know. We're just
not
on the
ready.
cusp of that. I know, me neither.
Again, thank you. And yeah, it's
Thank
been a real pleasure. Really,
Yeah,
really a
thanks
pleasure
for
to
the
meet you.
opportunity. And I'll just say again, back to writing, part of writing a book, and you want to get the word out there that you wrote the book for authors. This is just a wonderful opportunity. So I really am grateful to be here. And what you're doing is something that helps many authors. I would say for writers or soon to be authors, look for podcasts where you can talk about your book and your experience. And
Yeah, definitely. It's a good fit.
yeah,
Podcasting, writing
mhm,
kind
yeah.
of goes hand in hand. Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. All right. And I'll let you when it's published. I'm
No, I
behind.
think
Editing
that's
and
good.
editing takes so long.
Oh, I can imagine. I
Oh
can
my God.
imagine.
And I'm not techie at all. So
No.
it's fun. I've learned so much since I
Oh, I
decided to
bet.
start doing this about how to do these things. But yeah, it'll be nice someday when my podcast gets big, right? I'll just have a post-production person that will do
Oh,
all
wouldn't
that
that be
stuff for me.
great?
Wouldn't that
Yeah,
be fun?
that would
Yeah.
be great.
A
I wish you
producer.
luck. Yeah, that
Thank you.
happens.
We shall see how that goes. All right. Again, Karen, thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you,
Have
Julie.
a
Take
good day.
care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.